Okay, in this second video, I'm going to show you a technique that I use for exchanging the background. And it's a method based on the colour of the background. If you look there, we've got that nice green background there. And it's a nice and effective way to use when you've got a nice uniform background that's basically all pretty much the same colour as it is in this image. This is where it's nice to be careful about your background when you're actually taking the shots, because it can really speed up your post-processing when it's possible to do that. If you look at the background, you'll also see I've used an open aperture on the camera to throw the background out of focus. F5 in this case, using a full-frame sensor. That gives you a little bit more, a little bit less depth of field than when using a crop sensor DSLR. So f5.6 on a crop sensor wouldn't actually throw it out quite as much as that. All of these things took into consideration when taking the shot, it really makes the editing a simpler task. You can't always do that with nature though. Okay, so let's make a start. I've already mentioned the selection we made using the colour of the background. And then what we'll do is we'll extract the bird and the log away from the background onto a separate layer. So then we can put a new background behind that layer. So we will have a completely different background on there. Now, one of the first things that I actually do in Photoshop, I'll just move to Photoshop now, and actually in Photoshop, there we are, we're in Photoshop now. So when we're in Photoshop, the first thing that we're actually going to do is to duplicate this layer. So we've always got the background layer safe. If anything goes wrong, we can always revert back to the background layer. Now, a lot of people get really confused and lost in Photoshop. So what I suggest, even if you're a beginner, you should be able to follow this. But you need to take it step by step and not guess things, basically. Just copy exactly what I'm doing here. So first of all, to duplicate the layer. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is to duplicate the layer. And to do that, we need to view the layers. So we go to Window Layers if you can't see them. So we look down the list there and you'll see layers. And you'll see they've now appeared on the right. You've also got this little button there that allows you to see the layers. So we've got the background layer, and a nice way to work is to use the right mouse button, right click and duplicate the layer. Just click OK on that. And now you can see we've got two layers there, one above the other. And this is the one we're going to work on to extract now. So we need to make a selection. So we go to Select and we look for Colour Range. Now this is only in the later versions of Photoshop. I have to add this. So you will need the latest versions to be able to do this. So we click on Colour Range. And we get this little box come up. And basically the mouse turns to an eyedropper. You will see this here, and you've got selection or image. Well, we're working, doesn't really matter, there's no selection there, so it doesn't really matter which you're on that. The fuzziness, forget all those for now. We don't need to move that. Basically, we need to look at these little eyedropper tools. And I'm going to click on the plus. And then I'm going to click on the image, on the green area. And you'll see that that makes a selection. So basically the white area is the part that's selected, and anything black isn't selected. So you can see we've picked up parts of the background there. The only thing it's selected on the bird actually is the eye, which is a very similar colour. So we'll have to get rid of that later because we don't want the eye selected, just the background. So there's two ways we can work. We can either click on different parts of the image and you'll see that adds to the selection, or you can actually use the selection box here and click on the areas. So I'm just going to click on there, a little patch up there. And you'll see it's picking up a little few areas on the bird, but that's easy to put right after. There we go. So that's basically made the selection for us. One thing though, we need the actual bird to be selected and not the background, so we need to invert the selection. So we click the tick there, invert, and everything white is the area that's going to be selected. So I'll click on OK, and there's the selection. Now we can see there's a few areas on the log, there's a few areas on the bird that actually aren't being selected, so we need to add to that. Now a good tool for that is just the standard lasso tool. So we select that from the left hand side, and you'll notice they're on the what's called the options bar along here. You've got little buttons going along, new selection, add to selection. You'll see that's when you put the mouse over them, subtract and intersect. We want to actually add to the selection because we want to get those little bits that are missing on the bird, and then all we do is simply just draw around those areas with the mouse, being careful we don't go outside onto the background. So it doesn't really matter where I go inside that area. I'm just circling around the areas that aren't included. Make a big selection there, make sure all that's in. That's most of it. Now if we go down to the log, we can basically just draw, because there's bits of moss on the log which are green, so it's picking up those areas as well. There you can see I've now made that selection. We haven't got any areas inside the bird or on the log that have got the marching ants flashing around the dotted lines. And this is where I actually create what's called a layer mask. So to do that, if we look at the layers box here, you can see I've got background layer. I need to make sure on the top one. And then below that we've got some various symbols at the bottom there, little buttons. And the one that looks like a square with a circle in the middle, that will add a mask. And you will see that when you put the mouse over it, it says add layer mask, and I'll click that. And what that has now done is it's masked away the background. So basically we can just see the bird and the log now. You're saying, no, I can see it all. But that's because we can also see the background behind there. If we look at the layers there on the background, if I click the eye on that layer, you will see what I've selected. Now, when we're doing that, I'm just seeing there's a couple of areas here. You can just see there's a bit of white showing through there, a little bit there, so I can actually put that right now. And the way, I'm just going to click back on the layer mask. If you look at these layers now, if I click on this black and white box there, that's the layer mask. And if you look at it carefully, the areas that are white are the areas that's selected, and the areas that's black are the ones that are transparent that you can see through. So therefore, using this technique, we can use a brush and paint with white to add to the selection, or we can paint with black to take out the selection, just using a paintbrush. We must make sure we're on that mask, so we click the mask there on the black and white box. We go to a paintbrush, called the brush tool, and we select a brush. We'll probably use a hard edge brush, so you'll want to look for a hard edge circle on there. Okay, you can change the size of the brush by dragging the size. And it's a good idea to just put the mouse over the image, then you will actually physically see the size. That's about what I want. Just click on the top there, it'll disappear. So I must make sure now that I change the colour to white. You can see I've got black and white down here, and if I click this little arrow there, you can see that changes, reverts the two colours, reverses them. So I want to make sure that white's on the top. And I'm just going to click and paint. You can see that colour coming back in now. Just in those little areas, just make sure everything else is there. So by using this and painting, I can add those areas that was missing. There's just a bit down there. I'll just painting over this area there. You can see how that's bringing back. Actually went wrong there, so I'm going to hit Command Z on the keyboard. That's okay down there. You can always go to Edit Undo if you've gone wrong. So I'm just painting those areas, making sure they're nice and solid. There you go, that's looking really nice now. Okay, so I'm happy with that. There's a tiny bit just down here I can see that's sort of detached. So I can actually paint with black with that. So if I swap the two colours and I go to black, what that does, I'll just make a smaller brush. I'm just going to paint out that area. Just make sure there's nothing here. Just paint with black in these areas. You always get, sometimes you get a little bit hanging around in those areas, so just paint it with black. There we go. That's it. Okay, so now what I want to do is I'll go to the background layer. I'm actually going back now to Lightroom because what I want to find now is the image that I want to use for the background. Now you could go to File, Open, and open a picture, but it's the same method really, whichever way you use. If I go down on my screen here, I've still got Lightroom open. I can click on that, and there's the bird I've got. If I drag down here, I know I've got an image somewhere that I use quite a lot for my backgrounds, and there it is. So I go to right click, editing, Photoshop, and that will now go to Photoshop, take that image in, and then I go to select on the menu, all, so that makes a selection over the image, and then I go to edit, copy. So this is the background I'm going to use. I don't need that anymore, so once I've copied it, I can close that. I don't need to save it, and I'm back to this image. I must make sure that I look at the layers again, and I'm on the background layer. And then I go to Edit, Paste. And you'll see that that image is now coming to the background. Now the next step is the Move tool, which is at the top there, and what that allows me to do is to move this around. You see it's not quite big enough, it's not over all of the background. Now I'm using this image, I'm just going to move it about there. I'm using this image, you're actually not going to see a lot of the detail in the image because I'm actually going to blur it out just like you use using a long focal lens. All I want to do is to get these colours in the leaves and that to sort of be hiding away in the background there. So I'm actually going to distort this image. I'm just going to drag that up to the top of the image, and then on the bar at the top click the little tick, and that will say yes, I've completed editing the picture, I've completed resizing that background. So if we look now at our layers, you can see we've got the background layer, and this is the layer now that we're on at the moment. Making sure we're on that, what I want to do now is to blur that background. So I'll go to Filter, Blur, we're using Gaussian blur, or Gaussian blur. And you can see we've got a slider here. What I want to do is to get that sort of way out of focus look on the image. It's just going to give me a nice soft background with that little bit of colouring. It's personal choice really, I mean you can go to any extent. And I'll click on OK. And there's our image. I can just notice down here we've got a little bit of blur down there and also a little bit down there. So I can get rid of that by going back to my background layer and clicking, sorry, the top layer, the copy layer, and clicking back on the mask and using a black brush again. I'm just going to make the brush a bit smaller. If you look at your keyboard where you've got the enter key, between the enter key on your keyboard and the letter P, you've got two brackets, and by pressing those brackets, the left and the right one, you'll see that it actually changes the size of your brush, and that's a nice quick way to actually change the size of your brush. So I'm using that method, and then making sure I'm on black. You can see I can just paint out that little area there. I think I've got a little bit down there. No, that's a tree. That little bit white bit there, not too happy with that. We'll get rid of that down there. And just in this area, we've got a small. See, that's looking good now. Okay, so there's my completed image. And what I need to do now, once you've completed that, you can just flatten the image by going to Layer, Flatten Image. Just click OK on that. We don't need anything layers. So the image is now complete. I use actually brush to sign my work, so I just use the paintbrush for that, which is one I've created myself. Get a white brush, and there's my name, and with a click, the image is now complete. All I need to do is go to File, Save, and it will save the image. And when I close Photoshop, I've still got it there in Lightroom. So I'm back in Lightroom now, and there's the image, and there's the previous one. So you can see we've made quite a change there.